Good evening and welcome back. We're going to launch into a bit about saws, hand saws. And I want to show you some of the main problems and sticking points there are to having a poorly performing saw. And I want to show you this saw that I don't think it's been hardly used since I got it and used it on a couple of my very first classes that I taught right over here nearby at the Shaker Village here in Canterbury, New Hampshire. And that was in the summer of 1998. We did this little shaker end table, no drawer or anything. And there was not any machinery over there. And so I thought, oh, no problem. We'll just do this all by hand. I don't know what I was thinking. So I bought these beautiful saws, these Sandvik 328s, tenon saws. I had all this, I had the mortising chisels, everything, and I came up the stairs, and to my surprise, 4 women had signed up for the course. I thought this was a male-dominated sport, sort of, But over at the village, there were a lot of crafts offered, and so I think women found out about it, and they said, hey, I want to make that table, so there I was.
Awesome.
And we all had a great time and made 4 tables, but I'm telling you, it was a bit of a challenge. And there's an old saying that a poor craftsman blames his tools. But sometimes that's true, okay? Sometimes the tools should be to blame. And everybody had success, but it wasn't until later I realized I could have done a few things to tune these saws up to make them perform better. They were a bit of a challenge, and it was challenging to begin with to cut a bunch of tenons when you've never done it before. What was I big? But it worked out, and everybody went home with a glued up and pegged mortise and tenon end table. Wow. So I thought, what better way to talk about tuning up a saw than to take one of those saws, which I have never actually touched up. But I'm going to show you why these were difficult to work with and how we can make them better. And then I'm going to show you some techniques to using them, and we'll see how this goes. Now, I've got a piece of white pine here, about 3/4 of an inch thick. I'm just going to use this to make some sample cuts in the end of this board. Let's just see if I can saw to a line to start with. We'll just put one line down like that. All right, I'm going to try to saw to the far side of the line from your viewpoint. Just, wow, feels rough. That's not too bad, actually. And what I want you to notice is how kind of sloppy that saw is in the curve. See that? There's a lot of gap and play in the saw. That is primarily due to what's called set. If you're not familiar with set, it's just the way the teeth are bent. Every other tooth is bent outwardly like that. It's hardened steel, so these teeth will get sharp and they'll keep a sharp edge. But this saw has set on it, so every other tooth is going out in a direction there. Now, there's basically 2 types of sharpenings that you can do on saws. You'll either hear a saw called a rip saw configuration or a crosscut configuration. This is a rip saw configuration in like a carpenter's saw. So they've got like a nice angle. If you look at the V shape, the vertical part is almost perpendicular to the blade. Not quite, but almost. And that's kind of an aggressive cut. And then you have this longer slope toward the back. This being a rip saw, all those teeth are sharpened actually 90 degrees right across the saw. So you can sharpen these saws with a triangular file. A triangular file is going to give you 60, 60, 60 all across. So I would sharpen this saw by holding it right in there and pushing straight across. So at 90 degrees. So sharpening a rip saw is really pretty easy, except you want to make sure your set is nice. Now, why do you have set? You have it to reduce the friction on the plate. Mainly you need more set as a general rule for softwoods and for wetter woods, woods that aren't truly dry. But you know what? We're hardly ever using that in the cabinet shop. The woods we're working with are dry and they tend not to be super soft. Softwoods like pine don't even bind. I don't get much friction at all. So you really need much less set in a cabinet maker's shop to do fine work. The set can actually not be your friend. However, out on a job site, if you want to go saw some trees down, you need some of those large saws. They have a lot of set on them so that you really can fly through there and the blade can not be binding as it's tracking along. But having less set helps the plate of the blade track better in the saw curve. And that's one of the key things to understand in getting the most out of your saw. We're not going to really talk about crosscut today, but I just want to show you quickly a little of the geometry about it. This is the side view of what I just showed you on that rip saw. So you've got that angle, and this would be the way, that's toward the front of the saw. So you're pushing, you're cutting on the push. And these are almost vertical here. Now, this is the top view, so you can see the way the teeth are ground straight across pretty much. And this is the set of that tooth. Say it's bent that way. I shouldn't have drawn it all the way out here. It should be more like this. And then this one is going to be set out here. So let's go. So they alternate like that. Okay, and that would be like that. Okay, so you can see kind of how they're ground, and that's a fairly easy saw to sharpen because of that 90-degree angle. This, on the other hand, is the crosscut. Now, it's configured this way because you're cutting across the fibers, and so this one has a sharper angular grind to the inside of each of the teeth. So again, this tooth here, we're looking at the inside of it. It's set out that way, and this one is set out this way. And let me see if I can. So, and they're ground, you're pushing now the V triangle file at an angle. Almost a 45 in many cases. So you'd push it up this way and then going this way. Actually, every other one, you're laying it in there opposite. So let's see if I can get this one. Okay, so you're getting like this sharp kind of shearing, slicing cut on each side. Whereas the rip cut is cutting right in down the fibers, and you're coming up behind it. It's all this, like, you think of it all as the straw material, all the grain and fibrousness of the wood. It's all in the long way, and you're cutting right down the middle of them. So it's not the same, doesn't need the same kind of geometry on the teeth. So that's kind of our friend. Dovetail saws and tenon saws have a rip tooth configuration. It's the crosscut saws like that don't. So I have mostly my dovetail saw right here. I've got a Lee Nielsen. Now this is a 15 point per inch in a rip saw configuration. It's a dovetail saw. It's primarily almost always cutting in the rip way, always down into the end grain. Where this little beauty is also a Lee Nielsen. This is the 14 point per inch. This is a crosscut saw. So if you look in really close, and when you take this and look in, you can see that angular filing on the teeth that I just showed you about. You can crosscut with a dovetail saw, but it's not made to cut as cleanly and Anyway, so I just wanted to show you that. Our focus right now is just on rip saws. We're not going to mess around with the crosscut saw right now. I want to get your dovetail saw working well, and that, since that's primarily the most we do with hand saws, is cut it down into the end grain like that. So here we have a tenon saw that has a rip configuration as well, but we can tell already that it's a little sloppy. So the set is kind of strong on here. And what we want to do is tighten that up a little bit. I measured the thickness of this plate, and it's 28 thousandths of an inch thick. The Lie-Nielsen is 19 thousandths of an inch thick, 2819. So we're going to expect a thicker kerf or wider kerf with this one, but the main thing is we don't want it too much wider than the actual plate so that it tracks and performs well. Here's another way. Once I've run it down like I did here, I can feel it sloppy, but I can really tell if I take just the plate and then see how it's very loose in there. See how it's moving? So I'm not getting much happening there. Let me show you my Lie-Nielsen. This is now at 19 thousandths. This is my dovetail saw. Look at, you see any play there? And then we bring it up vertically here. It fits really nice. So you don't want zero set, but we have almost zero set there, okay? Where this one is super sloppy. So we're gonna adjust that. So when I got the Lie-Nielsen, you know what? I honestly can't remember if I did this adjustment. I don't think I did. You want to do this test though on your hand saws, especially your dovetail and tenon saws. Do this test, just get a piece of pine out and just make a straight cut and see how snug or loose you are in there. Now, if it's loose, then you're going to give it this little treatment. So what I'm going to use is a diamond plate here, and I'm just going to get some stops in the front and back so it doesn't slide around on me. What I've got here is a Duo Sharp diamond plate. Do we put the link to that? Yeah, so we put a link, not that I like using diamond plates for this kind of thing rather than a regular stone. You can use a regular water stone as well, but it just needs to be flat. But I've got this diamond plate. It really works well for this kind of thing. It's large enough, and you know it's flat as well. Because what we want to do is remove the set, reduce it at least, on each side. And you want to do it equally so that your saw continues to track true. If you took all the set off one side, your saw would want to drift in one direction on the saw cut. So we want a balanced treatment here. So what I'm going to do is I'm on the red. This is the second finest grit on this stone. I'm going to use this board as kind of a backer for pressure, but I'm just holding it right on here. Let me move this out of the way. This is just so I can hold it down. I could try to force it with my fingers, but I won't get even pressure. I'll be like here and here. So I'm just going to put this across the whole body of the plate. And what I'm going to do is just move it try to do exactly the same motion on each side. Okay, so I'll do like let's say 4 strokes on each side. Okay, holding pressure. Ready? 1, 2, 3, 4. Flip it over. 1, 2, 3, 4. All right, let's give it a saw cut. Let's see, I'll come right here. All right, still sloppy. So I'm gonna keep going. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay. Okay, it's getting better. See, there's not as much play. If I bring it in this way, it's going better, but there's still a little bit. I can do a little more. This had a lot of set on it. Maybe that's why they struggled so much with those stands. 1, 2, 3, 4. I did a half extra on that last one. Okay. It's starting to feel better. Just when it starts, it feels like it's getting really close down there. I'm going to do just a little more. All right, the question about the Japanese, I love Japanese saws. For a while, I cut all my dovetails with them. If you get used to them, they're quite nice. They cut on the pull stroke, and they have a very sharp, if you magnify those, they have like a very pointed teeth configuration, and they also have like a cross-cut grind on them. And there's almost zero set. So they cut really fast. The teeth are super brittle and they do break, but the nice thing is you just sub them out for another blade. But because they're thin, so thin, they cut on the pull stroke so the blade won't buckle while you're pushing forward. Where the Western saws have this back beam supporting, so you can cut on the push and the blade is thicker. You know, it's really what you get used to, what you like. I've gone back and forth. I actually, once I got that Lee Nielsen, I just stuck with it. I like the old saws. I just remember in Pug Shop, he had some old, similar to that with those old handles, and they were nicely tuned and sharpened, and I just like them. I'm used to it, but I got nothing against Japanese saws, so they're quite nice. You don't have to do this. All right, ready? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I decided to throw in that fifth one. Anybody noticing? 1, 2, 3, 4. All right. All right, this should be it. Got 85 saw cuts across here. Look at it now at the top. It resembles the Lee Nielsen a lot more, doesn't it? Are you seeing that? Mm-hmm. Man, it's so close. I want to do just one more because it's just the way it starts. It kind of, I don't think it's going to hurt. There's still a little movement here. See, it's better to sneak up on it like this than try to, do like 10 strokes on one side because you don't really know what you got. Holding this firmly. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Again. 1, 2, 3, 4. All right. I think that's going to be it. There's something about the way it starts. It just feels a little choppier, but not bad. Okay? So, as far as sharpening it goes, I'm going to hit it one more time. Sorry,
Have you heard of the method, John's curious, why not use a hammer to beat the set against another hammer to reduce the set without making it thinner? Have you ever heard of that option?
Yeah, one. Yeah, you can hammer to straighten them out again, and quite often they'll use a tool like this to reset the teeth. So this goes in, this is a little stop. I'm not going to do it, but if you had a saw like this, it goes in, and then it goes in, the screw actually is adjusted so it comes in right to the thickness of the blade, and it holds the saw blade at that angle, and then when I pull, see that little pincher come down? Can you see it?
Yeah.
That is set to about just the top third of the tooth. So it just bends the top third and it bends it over, and that's how you get your set. So, Usually if they're hammering them back, they're doing it so they can reset the whole saw plate to 0 basically, and then come back and set them all because things get weird, right? And then you also have to file along the teeth because with several sharpenings, they get out of alignment, as far as you want them all to be touching as much as you can. And some of the old saws, if you look at them at a flea market and you sight them down this way, you may see like that because they've been sharpened and not ever trued again. So that's a whole nother world. I know Paul Sellers has some good videos on sharpening saws if you really want to get into that. Anyway, once I've done that, if my teeth are dull, I can also touch them up by hitting them with a file. Now let's just do one more test before we get away from this. That feels pretty good. It feels pretty good down in there. There's still like a tiny bit of movement at the top, but look at the Lee Nielsen. I'm gonna, just for kicks, let's get the Japanese saw and put it right next to the Lee Nielsen. This is my Zuki saw. I can't really zoom in on those, but let's just do a cut here. And this, like I said, is cutting on the pull stroke. But look at that. Hardly any play. And it's slightly thinner than the Lee Nielsen nut, but not much. I didn't check with the micrometer the thickness of this, but it's definitely thinner. And this is why it's so thin that it cuts on the pull stroke. But this pops right out and you can buy a new replacement blade when you need to. I'm just gonna put this beam in the vise here and show you a quick. This is an old blade sharpening holder. It's fun to use because you just set your saw right in there and drop it down so that the teeth aren't too high off. You won't get much chatter there. I'm just about an 1/8 inch up. And then lock it in. Then you just come along with your file. Now, this, as I said, it's straight across. But the thing is, about this is because you want to maintain the balance of your saw blade, you want to do every other tooth in this direction, then flip it around and go back and hit those between teeth. So I'm going to put a piece of tape on here. I'm going to just go across the middle a little bit here just to show you. And we'll see if we can put a little bit of an edge where I'm probably going to use this saw most and see if it makes any difference, okay? So this one I'm starting off with, I'm going to go this direction. Let me find a good, yeah, that feels good. Then I'll just count 2. You want to do the same thing each time. Be like a machine. 3 days later, this is, now I want to hold it kind of at an angle to relate to the teeth because it's at an angle. It's not vertical like that. It's remember, it leans forward. 1, 2. Okay, that's enough. I would just go across the whole thing. I'm not going to bother doing all that. I just want to do the, oh shoot. My tape was not on the saw, it was on there. I'll be able to see it. This is all for demonstration purposes, my friends. All right, I can see the shininess there. Okay, so I'm going to go right there. Okay, 1, 2.
James curious, is what they call a gentleman's saw the same as a dovetail saw?
No, I think you just have to be a really nice guy to use that. 1, 2. I don't know. I don't know. I have read that term. Somebody help us out with that. I'm curious myself.
No, Tom, Sean's curious why you didn't wipe the saw off after using the diamond stone.
Because I'm a slob, basically. No, I will wipe it off. I'm going to show you that I actually am going to wax the blade. I just wanted to finish that. Now,
Tony
no,
was asking about waxing, so.
obviously I would go over the whole thing here, but I'm going to hit it. Now, I've probably created a little set again when you would sharpen it like that. So I'm going to knock it off one more time. All right. And then we will wax the blade to reduce any kind of friction. Because when you've reduced almost all of the set, you want it to still slide through there easily. 2, 6, 7. Okay, this is it. Okay, let's put a little wax on the blade. And we'll check it one more time on our test board, and then we're going to put it to a test. We're going to actually see if you can quickly cut the second half of some dovetails and see if we get a good result with this less than perfect saw. Okay, there we go. All right, now let's get it back in, give it a shot. See how it works. One more time.
You can talk about grip. Any thoughts on gripping the saw? And thumb placement?
What a difference. Okay, you see there's no
Wow.
it's not falling out anymore. Nice and clean along there. So even this Sandvik saw is working quite well. Now, we did also put a link to, I think it was a crown type saw. And that's a less expensive back saw or tenon saw that is probably more in the class of the Sandvik. It's probably a little better than this, actually. But you can check that out, because when you get those, you're going to probably have too much set to do nice work. But what a difference. The cleanness of that kerf is much, much different. So what we want to do is let's put it to a test now. I know I can cut dovetails with this saw, but what about this Sandvik, which was pretty lousy. All right, so here I've got a little sample board. I'm going to use one of the sides to our hanging cabinet to set this down. I've been watching that course. This will look familiar, but we're just going to bring this down flush with the top just to get it up off the bench a little to make our marks. Push it out. So I'm just holding the square. The base of the square is helping me align to the bottom edge of this. And I slide it up until I can see it looks just where you want it. I'm going to hold it and get the marking knife and just come in and make some marks here. Now, this is going to be a test, because sawing to a knife line is not easy with a sloppy cutting saw. I'm going to flip this around.
I believe the diamond stone link is already in the description below.
Yeah, it is. I put the Duo Sharp. It's the 10-inch. You can get the 8.
I put in there. If it took, it's there, but I'll check
Yeah.
after.
Okay, so I made the knife marks. Now I'm going to scribble at the part I want to saw away. And you may be able to see on the camera those light knife lines. That's what I'm going to go for when I make these cuts. So I'm going to square this into the bench. All right, so I've got this all secured. You know, if you had a Moxon vise, this would be good for that as well. Oh, I forgot one thing. I'm just going to use these little cuts to draw some perpendicular lines, because this is key to a good fitting dovetail joint, is having nice plumb cuts. So but I'm going to be sighting the knife lines on top. That's the key to making it. Just going to try to get the teeth of the saw to touch into that knife line. Oh yeah. Just get the pencil right in the knife cut. Okay, now we've got all those, and we're ready to try out our saw. So we're going to, my thumb is just resting against as I draw it back to create the initial groove, okay? And then I'll go forward, and once I get it flowing, I'm not forcing, I'm not putting a lot of pressure on the saw. I want the old saying, let the saw do the work. But as I make my forward cuts, I'm going to feel the front is going to lower, and I'm going to sight it going right across that knife line. And then once I get into there in the groove, then that lack of slop on the curve helps me to track true and plumb to that pencil line. Okay, that's the goal anyway. Let's try it out. Here we go. Just going to draw it back. Just want to touch the knife line.
Any tips on avoiding the jumping that happens at the beginning?
Just go lightly. So I'm doing it right now. I'm dragging it back so it doesn't jump right now. I'm dragging it back. There's no jumping really. Then when you go forward, don't put a lot of force on it. And I know it sounds crazy to use this as an illustration, but it is like, think of it almost like you're moving a violinist's bow. You're not putting pressure. You're letting it kind of slide right across the strings. So just let it go, and look, my hand, I always try to hold like the lightest grip on the handle without it falling out of my hand. Do not squeeze the handle or you won't let it track where it wants to go. It's like golf. You don't want to be overly stressed. Some of you know golf, I would assume. Same thing, drag it back. Oh, I can hear the concerto. I'm happy with those 3 cuts so far. Now, same thing. Notice I did, this is just a rhythm thing for more accuracy with the saw. When you're cutting like this, you could make a bunch of lines just on a scrap piece like this, make the angled dovetails, square the lines down, and just make a bunch of practice cuts across. Cut it off, do it again. Get really comfortable and used to your saw before you come up to a situation where, you know,
it matters.
You're on the first tee. You want to have a lot of practice before you get out there, okay? So here we go. We're going to just bring it back. But you'll feel a lot more confidence with it. Okay, one more. Veritas makes a nice dovetail saw too for a pretty good price.
What do you think is the best TPI for what you're doing?
I like the Lee Nielsen is a 15. I think right around 15 is ideal because you get a really nice fine cut, and it cuts pretty fast. If the teeth are too large, you'll get more of that bouncing, and you can't drag the violin bow quite as easily. Okay, there we go. Let's get that out now with the coping saw. We'll chop that and see how they fit. I have no idea what's going to happen here because I have not had good success with those saws in the past, so that was the first time I've tuned it up, obviously. I'm just going across, trying to stay above my marking gauge line there. If you want to get into this and you're not in the course, we really get into this in the course, like making our little hanging cabinet. This is the same joinery, and it's a lot of fun. I show like two different methods for doing it.
Do you notice a difference in the performance of the Japanese saw because it's more flexible and not as stiff as the other kinds? Is that
Yeah, it can wander a little bit more on you, but remember, it cuts on the pull stroke. So the stiffness of the blade is kind of negligible because when you're pulling it, it's taut. And that's the whole genius of it. All Japanese saws are thinner plates than American saws for that reason. They cut on the pull and so that they really knife through the wood. They've got these really spear point, razor sharp teeth. So that's the genius of that configuration. But you've got to practice. I remember when I first started with the Japanese saw, I tended to drift one way when I was cutting on one side of the dovetails, So you practice a bunch and you start to realize, oh, I'm kind of looking at it from a funny angle, and I've got to get my alignment better when I set up to make that cut. And then you will find you'll have success, but it's just getting used to it. Because being a thinner blade, it can drift more easily. Just want to chop to that knife line, and we'll see how this fit. So I'm going to just come away from it a little. Oh, forgot to do that.
Ken says that he looked at a document looking at the Veritas dovetail saw, and he says the teeth are set at .003 inches.
0.003 each side. Huh, interesting. I know I've had Veritas saws here, and I believe we had to strike them a little bit, but you can get it home and see how it works for you, because you'll find that it could affect the tracking if it's too much. All right, now I'm in the knife line. I'm just going to go about halfway. Use that marking knife line there. What? Flip, and we're gonna just get the other side, and we'll be in business.
Gone into a dovetail demo.
Oh yeah, this is just quick though. If there are any questions, I'll be happy to answer them, but we're not really.
I did have a question. I'm looking back here for it. John is wondering if sapwood are types of wood that may cause rusting on saw blades.
Rusting is just the introduction of moisture, so if you've got an usually the wood we're working with is dry, so it's usually a function of the humidity in the shop more than the moisture on the wood itself. So now I'm just going to clean to the bottom of these as well as I can here. I'm happy with all the saw cuts. They look nice and plumb and true there. Plumb good. You were dying to say that, right?
Conversation about Rob Kosman's saws that he makes here.
Oh yeah,
Cells, I should say.
I'm sure those are nice too. They look really nice. I've not tried one, but they're not inexpensive. But neither are the Lee Nielsen's. Usually, you get what you pay for. All right, we're going to check this out. This is nice wood to start out on, being pine. It's very forgiving and fun to saw. And let's see if it worked. How we did with our first use of the new tuned up saw. So that's the face. This is how I had it aligned. So this should be where it goes. Oh, that felt good. What do you think? That new saw? I'm happy.
The new old saw.
The new old saw. So that's the kind of results you can get, but you can't get those results if it's sloppy in there. This is a lot of the same principle that I talked about when we were talking about how to use the bandsaw for the best effect. You know, we talked about sawing along a line with the bandsaw. Let's say we had a curved line on here. Whoops. The oak is really grainy. And we wanted to saw on that. So when we'd come in with the bandsaw, there's always a lot of set on the saw, on the bandsaw. So you've got that set. The saw's cutting in, you have this set, and then you have the back of the blade itself. But the kerf it leaves behind is like twice as wide as the blade because of the set in front. So you have kind of this sloppy feeling. It's the same as the back of the saw. So when I've talked about how to get a smooth cut on a bandsaw, you can't really change the set on the saw, but you can slightly twist your material so that one side of the sloppy kerf in the back actually leans on the body of the saw blade. So it becomes like an ad hoc fence. It's a fence after the teeth. And you just kind of use that to lightly bear on. Let's just make a cut right on here, right now. I'm just going to show you right here. Uh-oh. Sorry. Well, it was working. I just wanted to stop because I feel like that blade's about to break. Did you see it really pulsing? It would, yeah. So that's why I stopped it, but I'll mess around with that later. When the blade starts to really pulse like that, usually it's right along the weld, and that's been in there a while, so I didn't want that to happen on camera. It stops almost instantly. What could go wrong? The bandsaw is one of the safest tools in your shop. So if you're gonna get, I've had this question just recently. Someone said, if I had to get one power tool, I like hand tools, I don't have a table saw, I don't have a joiner planer, what's the one tool? And if you like to hand plane, okay, well, a bandsaw is great because you can do a lot of things with a bandsaw. You can cut curves, you can resaw wood if you want to saw it down to thickness and then hand plane away. The table saw is great too, but it's a straight cutting machine. So you can also cut straight with a bandsaw, well tuned, but you get a little rougher surface. So that could be something to debate. What would you say? One tool is the bandsaw or the table saw, or a joiner planer. It's hard to say, but just supplementing with hand tools, you know which way you'd go. All right, everybody. Well, that was fun. I feel like I got some new saws because I have 3 others of these in the cabinet that have hardly been used. I'm going to go back and tune those up before we have a class here again where we use saws like that, and I won't feel guilty about handing it to the students. But thank you so much for being part of this. We couldn't do it without you. We really do appreciate it. If you enjoy this content, please share and let your friends know, and also consider subscribing and liking and all that. And if you want to go deeper with us, head on over to epicwoodworking.com and take particular note particular note, of the neighborhood. That's our community, our new community you can move into and get all kinds of benefits and features. On behalf of the camera lady and myself, we look forward to seeing you next time right back here. Good night, everybody.
Awesome to be with you guys. Thank you.
Good night.
See ya.